Good evening. My name is Anna Fiorentino, and tonight I would like to discuss with you the importance of good leadership. Now, I'm sure this is something we've all heard mentioned many times, how it's important to have good leaders. But tonight I would like to give an example as to why this is so important. And to that, I would like to use an example of my own past. So when I was younger, I used to work in fast food. And while I was there, I had been there for a few years, I noticed a problem that had started occurring. This problem was that some of the leaders were not managing properly. And what I mean by that is that when they were running the shift, they would kind of just go into the back and disappear for a long time. It kind of felt like hours at times. And there wasn't enough work back there for that long and for that many of the managers to be gone. And because of that, it really caused an issue because we were without the people who were supposed to be running the shift. And I could say personally that it really affected the employee morale as well. Because I know I wasn't the only employee there who noticed this and who had an issue with the fact that our management was not around and doing their job like they were supposed to at times. To make matters worse, the person who would seem to always be left in charge wasn't quite the best candidate as well. They would delegate a lot, but they weren't really big into jumping in and helping with a position. So, according to the Too Narrow, Too Broad article, it basically just talks about the importance of good leaders and how they need to be, how leaders need to have a good balance. Too little control is a problem, but so is too much control, as employees will feel stifled from that. And so this document really talks a lot about just that balance, but also just how important that leadership control is to employee satisfaction. When you have a healthy balance in how your leaders work, it really affects the employee morale in a good way. And when your leaders are too lax, employees are going to struggle because it won't be as organized as it should. But if a manager is too controlling, then employees are going to feel stifled and micromanaged, and that's also an issue. And so that's a lot. And this article really talks about how leaders affect employee satisfaction at work. So to really go a little bit further into the analysis of this issue at the fast food job I worked, it really shows that supervisor satisfaction is very important, and our managers weren't supervising as properly as they should. They fell into the category of being too lax in their management, and that too little control, like I said, it really hit the wrong way, because not only were they not there to run things, but it showed that they really just weren't as invested, it seemed, in the job, because they weren't putting forth as much effort. And I know I could speak personally that it really did affect job satisfaction. Every time I saw this happening on my shift, it really bothered me. It really made me upset. Really frustrated me, especially when I saw this other employee who was he was management, but he was lower management. And I kind of just saw how he would either always stand with the managers or he would always take charge, but he wasn't as big into jumping in and helping. And so it felt a lot like, just favoritism, and like he wasn't really pulling as much weight as he could have to help. And I really just saw these two things kind of going hand in hand as an issue with the leadership at this time. And it really did affect just my level of satisfaction with work when I was there. So, solutions to this problem. Well, the first and maybe the most obvious one would be to speak up about it. At that time, I was a very quiet, very shy person, and so speaking up about it was something very much out of my comfort zone, so I never did. Um, and that was something I could have taken the initiative of and had said something about it first. There's also just making sure that managers are doing what they're supposed to, that accountability, to make sure that managers are supervising as they ought, are fulfilling their duties and their responsibilities. And just having that accountability would have really helped, I think, in that. I think there also could have been better structure with hierarchy. As I said, so the managers who were supposed to be running shift weren't quite doing that as thoroughly as they ought to have. And the guy who stepped up was definitely like lower in the management. And there were a lot of people in between those two categories who could have stepped up if necessary and ran things, but were not given the opportunity. And I think if maybe some of them had been, at least part of those problems would have been better. The employee who wasn't really, pulling as much of his weight would have had to have put forth more effort, and I think that would have really helped, because favoritism and letting people get away with stuff like that just doesn't help in a workplace. And again, having a more experienced employee managing things could have been better, just because they know the business better and they have been around more. And so I think just that having that hierarchy could be important. Not saying that lower managers should never have an opportunity, but maybe not every single time they work that's what's happening. Obviously, there are some problems with the solutions that could arise, such as, like I said, speaking up, there is that problem of fear, that nervousness that could come up, and that can make it hard to speak up, especially if these are like really high up managers. There might not be anyone else you could report it to. However, I would say at this point, if that is an issue and you are nervous, to maybe find another employee who maybe feels similarly and to confront these people about it together, but respectfully, of course. The other issue that may come up is just the resistance that might be felt from the other managers, because especially if they don't really want to change, if they don't want to take on more of that responsibility and really step up at times, there could be that resistance, and it could make for awkwardness and some tension. However, I would say in regards to these potential problems, to just kind of push through anyway, to be respectful, but to speak up about it, maybe to present a couple ideas of your own, because at the very least, at least you would have tried. Nothing may change and nothing may happen. You can't continue to be upset about something if you're not willing to put forth an effort and at least speak up about it to try to make a difference. So yeah, that is why managers are so important, because good management will lead to everything flowing properly in a business, but also high levels of employee satisfaction, because they see that their managers are invested, that their managers care, and that their managers really do want what's best for the company and for you as an employee. Thank you very much. Have a great night.